Keeping processes discreet. How do you sell a business without customers, employees, competitors finding out while still accomplishing the right goal? We'll talk about 4 steps that we implement in every process and 1 tip that we've seen from our experience over 100 plus deals. So the first prong is scoping out the right parties. And so not everybody you think that's going to be the optimal counterparty or acquirer for your business is going to be someone that you want to give all of the sensitive information to. These can be competitors. These can be other people in your space, in adjacent spaces. So it's important to find the right parties and, if you will, label each in terms of what risk they pose from a discretion or from a sensitive information perspective. Secondly, all initial conversations should be anonymous. We reach out to companies saying, hi, we are representing a company that does a thing in this general quadrant of the United States or wherever it may be in the world, and these are some of the high-level metrics that you may want to look at to get to value. And that way we're able to kind of suss out and separate some of the wheat from the chaff as to who would be interested, who would not be interested. And if we don't get the sense that someone's a bona fide party, we'll exclude them from the list and they never even know who it was that we were talking about. Next are non-disclosure agreements. So after we scope out the right parties, after we have these initial discussions on an anonymized basis, if we feel like someone is legitimate in terms of their capability, in terms of track record, in terms of their desire, and in terms of their funding, then we will put forth a non-disclosure agreement that requires that they sign and agree to keep all confidential information, broadly defined, confidential and discreet, before we release the name of the company and any other information. And lastly is phasing. And this goes for who we're reaching out to as well as the process within the conversation with any of the respective parties. And so first off, if there's companies that are going to be more sensitive, maybe you want to keep a tighter leash on that conversation, then it may make sense to reach out to those companies a little later in the process, once some of the items have already been discussed with some of the parties that are lower risk in terms of discretion or privacy concerns. Secondly, every phase of our process is intentionally created to winnow people out. And so we have follow-up questions, follow-up discussions, initial indications of interest, further conversations, all before we get to a letter of intent. And the purpose of each of these exercises, inclusive of the NDA, is that every time we are asking someone for something, that we are pushing something forward, there's going to be parties that fall away. And by virtue of that, if there's just less parties that are proceeding throughout the process, then there's less risk points for any lack of discretion or privacy concerns relative to sensitive information. That's how we keep a process discreet. That's how we keep sensitive information private. We scope out the right parties. We have initial discussions on an anonymized basis before anyone knows the name of a company they're going to be under a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement. And lastly, we have phasing implemented both within the conversations for a respective party as well as in when we're reaching out to which categories or cohorts of parties to make sure that all of the most sensitive and private information is being protected at all steps. And lastly, a tip that we see from our experience and that we like to implement in every process and advice we give to every client: give information out as if there is no NDA. So what we mean by that is, if we have to disclose customer information in terms of customer concentration and categories, well, let's do just that. Customer ABC, categories XYZ, and not give out specific customer names. Same things with employees, which can be sensitive, is what are the roles that they fulfill? Does it really matter what their name is? And the answer is no. Particularly no until there's an offer that's agreed upon. And so by virtue of keeping some of these pieces of information redacted or private, we are proceeding throughout the process as if there is not an NDA in place. We're only going to give information oftentimes that we would feel comfortable giving to someone if they were not under NDA, because we don't want anything to be tactically useful against our interests or those of our clients. And so if you think of it, if we get all the way to an offer being accepted relative to an LOI, after which we then disclose customer names, we then disclose employee names, it's only one party, because we've already negotiated out the whole process, negotiated with all the different parties to find the optimal counterparty. And at that point in time, you are only disclosing this information to one party. So again, if you think of every point of contact you have as a potential loss of information, then it's important to A, minimize the amount of contacts that will ever even see that information, and then B, have them at a stage of the process where they're so interested that it would be incredibly against their self-interest to actually disclose any of that information or walk away from the deal. And so by virtue of doing that, we're able to effectively control all of the private information and maximize discretion throughout the process. So that's the thought for today: discretion in the M&A process. Hope the week's going well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See you over next time.